Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening and thank you for helping me be on purpose. So today I wanted to talk about actually an article a friend sent me about Megan Good and Devin Franklin. So you guys probably heard that they are in the midst of getting a divorce, and everybody has an opinion on like their situation and what that means or whatever. They were married 9 years. And everybody has their say on what it is. But really, marriage is work, right? And so if they don't have the time to make their marriage work, then it's definitely not going to work. But who knows? Who are we to judge on their situation, why it worked and why it didn't work? That's not even what I really want to talk about. But it made me think about what happens now, like when you get a divorce and you've done some planning together, you built your lives together. Like 9 years is a long time. You probably think like, okay, this is going to happen, right? And then it doesn't work out, and now you have to separate everything and get a divorce. So I've had a lot of clients ask me these questions, and it's so funny because I've spoken to many like couples, and it gets interesting when they ask about what happens if we get divorced, what happens if this doesn't, work out, and you kind of know, like, yeah, this one may not work, but we'll plan anyway. But seriously, when people separate, it is, a challenge. It's something to consider going into planning. What's going to happen if we break up? So how it really works is when you are creating a trust, trust is created, both of your assets are going to be transferred into the trust. So what does that mean? We're going to title husband's assets and wife's assets in the name of the trust. And because when you're creating a trust together, you're co-trustees, right? You both have the authority over these assets to make decisions for these assets, to care for and manage these assets, right? But some of them may be your separate assets. Maybe you had a property before you got married. Maybe the other person got an inheritance, things like that. So those type of things will be your separate property generally. And then there are things that you own together, like maybe your family home or what have you. Maybe you guys have a joint account or joint investments, things like that. So all of those things, though, are going into your trust. So now what happens now when you get divorced, it's a little tricky, right? So it can be as easy as just transferring everything out, like reversing the process and making sure that you guys now own, again, your separate assets. But what happens when the divorce is not amicable and now you're fighting over what what each of you are entitled to and what you want? And so what I typically tell people is when you have a significant amount of separate property that you want it to remain separate and you want there to be no question as to whether or not that's going to be yours if this marriage doesn't work out, that you should put it in separate trusts. And I don't generally advocate for this. I'll have clients plan together unless they tell me something specific, like about this is my family home and I want it to always stay in my family and never, things like that I can see from analyzing their assets saying, there may be a deeper question here. Or if they raise the issue, right? Because we don't know what people's relationships are really like unless they raise the issue. So really tell them that you should plan with separate trusts if you're really concerned about these separate assets. And then you can do a joint trust for the joint assets that you have, or your separate trust can co-own certain assets, There's all those type of things that we can kind of do with that. And the reason why I say that you should have it separate is because in divorce court, most of the divorce courts that I'm aware of, and I would be so bold to say across the country, right? Judges are given a lot of discretion. Like they get to make a lot of the decisions when it comes to divorce, when it comes to family law and things of that nature. So if you don't want there to be any, question, or you don't want it to be used as a bargaining tool, or you don't want it to become an issue, the best way is to not only have it in separate trusts, but also have a prenup, right? So that's like two layers. I had a client come to me who was very concerned about that. She had gotten an inheritance and wanted to make sure that it remained hers. And so that is, really the recommendation, double up on your protections. We want to make sure that that we add some layers to it, right? So that is really it. So now you know a little bit about, how you should protect your assets in these type of situations. My guest today is a specialist in a different type of protection that we're going to get into. His name is Anthony Davenport. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview as much as I did. Welcome, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's amazing to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, guys, if you don't know, my guest is Anthony Davenport. He is a credit activist, which I find very interesting. He
Yeah.
is also, an advisor. He really is big in the space of credit and has done many things in that area and is really changing how things are how his clients are experiencing credit. So we're going to talk all about that. So again, thank you, Anthony. Um, can you tell me how you got into this space of credit? Like, what was your journey along the way?
Well, they say necessity is the mother of invention, and that's the truth. And
For
I
sure.
literally took lemons and made lemonade, but I was a banker in my past life. I don't like to talk about my banker past because I'm atoning for my sins now with helping everybody. But uh, basically, I was a banker for almost 10 years, giving people loans.
Okay.
And I found that nobody knew anything about credit. Like
Mm,
I would have people that would make millions of dollars and be well educated, invest in the stock market. And then they would come to me and say, can you take a look at my credit and then tell
mhm,
me what it means? Like, I don't know what's good. I don't know what's bad. I don't know
mhm.
what's great. I don't know what makes it that. And I'm like, well, it like basically determines the interest rate that you're going to pay.
Right.
And you have no idea how this thing is calculated.
Mhm,
And then I started learning that credit is being used for everything, not just mortgages, but credit card interest rates,
mhm.
auto loans, even your auto insurance is now looking at your credit and determining what your rate is going to be, as though having a poor credit score means you're going to be a poor driver. And
I hear
you know,
Yeah, I heard about that. I really do find it interesting, and it's been that way for some time now, right? We just didn't
oh
know that
yeah,
this is what
oh yeah, we
what
just
they're
didn't
using.
know. They just
Mhm,
say what's the rate. They tell you
mhm.
homeowners insurance is now looking at your credit score,
Really?
like your house is more likely to burn down if you got a 500 score. I mean, but you got to
Crazy.
realize it's all about money. So
Mhm,
they built this system so they can make as much money off of humanly possible off of you. But
mhm,
so anyhow, I knew about all this and I thought that credit was really interesting. I started learning how to help people improve their score so they can get better rates,
mhm.
qualify for bigger mortgages, get bigger homes, that sort of thing. And then the real estate crash of 2008 happened.
Mm. It's so funny how that's such a pivotal moment in everybody's life. It's like before 2008 or after 2008? Go ahead.
Yeah, and it was, I've been around for a minute, so that was my second recession that I saw, and I was
Oh,
directly
wow.
involved because I was a dot-commer back when the dot-com crash happened.
Oh, really? Wait, let's
Oh,
not skip over that.
yeah, yeah. I had just gotten out of school and
Mhm.
I got my degree and I was doing HTML coding and I thought I was hot stuff,
Wow.
making good money on one of those dot coms where they had people
Mhm.
riding in the hallways on razor scooters and all exposed,
Right.
wiring and stuff like that, all hip, and they had like happy hour, they had a game room, like
Mhm.
it was the quintessential dot com experience. Where then you were like, how does anyone make money around here? What's our model? And
Right.
people were like, ah, who cares? Drink this margarita. It's on the house. So
This was like a peer into what like a Google or Amazon life is, but it was back then.
yeah, back when it was just like all you
Mhm.
had to do was have a website and people were throwing money at you. Like, oh my
Wow.
God, you're a king. And I was like, this model doesn't make any sense. And they're like, don't worry about it.
Mhm.
So so that was my first recession and first interaction with it.
Okay.
When the 2008 recession happened, I had saved up a lot of money considering I was pretty young.
Mhm.
I owned a few different homes, was
Oh,
renting some
good.
out.
Mhm.
I had, that a nice big nest egg. I didn't ever spend more money than I made. I had no credit card debt. But after a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
I ran out of options. I'd maxed
Wow.
out the credit cards trying to make ends meet. Um, and then when I was, I had to make a very tough decision.
Mm-hmm.
And when my wife was 8 months pregnant with our first son,
Mm-hmm.
I had to go to her and say, I met with an attorney. We have no other option but to file bankruptcy.
Mm.
And listening to the sound she made as she cried, like
Aw.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
That has motivated me to this day to make sure we're never in that position again. And we had to move out of we had a
Mm-hmm.
deluxe apartment in the sky, like, we were living the
The
high life from,
dream.
we had a high rise luxury apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to move out of that into a place that was infested with roaches and mice.
Oh man.
Uh,
What city
and
were
that's
you
what,
in? Sorry.
Brooklyn,
Brooklyn. Okay.
and that's where we brought our firstborn son home to.
Wow.
Um, he was my wife was holding him in her arms as we met with the bankruptcy trustee and had to explain like how we went broke.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, there's the bright side of this, which
Right.
is, my mother-in-law came to visit a few weeks later,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "What is your plan? How are you going to make money and provide for your family?"
Right.
And I'll tell you what, everyone you know is going to be touched by this. This is going to be a huge recession.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to build a business that helps people recover from it.
Wow. How did you know to have that point of view? Because, you know, you're down and out at this point. How did
Yeah.
you know, like when you saw what was happening, to just be the person to provide the solution?
Honestly, it was just because I got punched in the face by this.
Mm.
That was my second recession, so I got punched twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? If I can be impacted by this, because I had an immaculate credit score, I
Right.
had a good amount of savings, I didn't overspend. But if I could get caught up in this and go bankrupt, this is going to impact a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to lose jobs, people are going to make less money. Like, it's going to impact everybody. Let me get ahead of this
Mm-hmm.
and pivot. And when I told my boss that I was quitting to start my own thing, he was like, "Why would you do that? Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
just now starting to get back on your feet. You're making okay money." And I
Right.
said, "I don't like where this is going with banking. This is where the future is." And about a year later, he rang me up and said, "Are you hiring?"
Wow.
And I hired him. I hired
Wow.
him.
Mm-hmm. So what is the so you started your business and you were just helping people repair their credit so they could get back on their feet. Is that what it was?
Yeah, and rebuild credit because I
Mm.
had to go through it myself. I went bankrupt, and then within 6 months, I had a 640 credit score, which was average at the time, because I
Mm.
knew what to do. And I
Mhm.
documented it, I wrote it down, and then I said, this is going to be something I'll do to help people out. And originally, I was charging, a couple $100 to just write up a plan for them and hand it to them.
Mhm.
And I found out that people didn't want to do that. And then they just said, like, "Here, I'll pay you a few grand, just do it for me.
Mm.
Let me know when the Amex Platinum is on its way." I'm like, "All right, cool."
Wow.
So, yeah, that's really how.
So you figured out this whole credit industry just by working on your own stuff.
I learned a lot from my own stuff,
Mm.
necessity, mother of invention, because I couldn't find any books on how to rebuild your credit, reestablish it.
Mhm.
Uh, I couldn't find a lot on credit repair. The ones that were out there were terrible,
Mhm.
and they just were too. They weren't from people that actually did it for a living.
Okay. Right.
And a lot of people in the credit repair world are very secretive of their processes
That
because they don't
that's
want
true.
other people to know.
It's true.
It's not rocket science, but it's very difficult and time consuming to figure out. It takes you
Mhm.
years to really get to the bottom of it if you're digging constantly.
If you're digging.
The
I had
perspective
a
of that is hard.
I had a little stint with doing my own credit repair. I didn't know, obviously, it was a thing in my like early 20s. As usual, you get credit cards in college and you run up all this debt. And then I started to realize things that I wanted to do, I couldn't do because my credit was bad. So I had to start to figure out, because there was no like really credit repair people. The only people
Yeah.
that were out there was I forgot what you call it. It's people who they tell you stop paying all your debt and debt
Oh yeah.
consolidation. That's
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
tried that and that didn't work for me either, because they repoed my car because the bank was like, no, we not playing that
Yeah.
game. So I had to do it. I didn't know it was a thing. So that's what I'm saying. It's like for you to have the forethought, like, oh, do this for myself, and now I can do it for other people, and it worked.
And honestly, it was crazy and foolish and stupid. I said to
Mhm.
my wife, like afterwards, I said, why did you say yes to creating a business? We had like maybe $1,500 to our name. We had,
Mhm.
not a long list of contacts, at all.
Mhm.
Just a dollar in a drain, basically. And I was like, why did you say yes to this? That was so risky. But he's like, no, I believed in it and I believed in you and I knew that we could figure it out.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wow, that was being an entrepreneur, you just jump in with 2 feet and then you're like, wait, where am I
Right.
at? What am I doing?
Right. You're like, I better keep swimming.
Exactly.
So when did things start to change when you realized like, okay, this business is really going to be successful? Like how did things start to change for you?
Yeah, after the first year, when I went to my accountant to file taxes, he was like, congratulations.
Mhm.
I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you were profitable in your first year. Do you know how rare that is? And I'm like,
Mm.
man, I got a wife and a kid to feed. Like, failure was not an option. I had to
Mhm.
do that. I'm like, that's a big deal. And he's like, oh yeah. And I was like, you know what? I really see this thing getting big.
Mm.
So I told my wife, listen, I can't do anything but work right now. So why don't you go home to, your folks' place for a few weeks?
Mhm.
And I moved into the office to
Wow.
work round the clock. And I had an air mattress and everything. I mean, I had a whole setup. I had cable TV, I had my Apple TV, I had my Sonicare, I had my pajamas, it was an old hotel, so I had like, full shower and bath and all that stuff, so I could do
Mhm.
that.
Okay,
And
okay.
I literally wouldn't leave the hotel or the ex hotel for weeks at a time. I would
Mhm.
just work until I couldn't keep my eyes open. So I knew that I was onto something then.
Mm.
And later on, I just realized the path would also lead to, the rich and famous, which is now what I work with. And I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming.
Oh, really? So how did that transition go? So, I mean, I assume like you hired a team at some point and did all that good stuff. How did you get from there, from the hotel room to now you're working with celebrities?
Yeah. So basically, I set out to
Mhm.
be the best on the planet at
Mm.
understanding credit. And what's funny is I just looked at a life plan that I wrote just over 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was saying within the next 10 years, I want to be the global leader of understanding credit and all that goes into it.
Mhm.
And so I set that out as my intention. But then along the way, basically, I developed a reputation for, hey, this is the guy to go to get your credit fixed.
Mm.
And as a result of that, the rich and famous started knocking on my door and saying, hey, I need that too.
Mm.
People don't think that they need help with their credit, but trust me, they do.
Mm.
They get medical collections just like the rest of us, where you have a health insurance, you go to the doctor, and then everyone that you touch is a different bill to your insurance company. Some people are in network, out of network. Like, you're not
Right.
if you're going to the emergency room, you're not asking everyone that comes to you, like, are you within my network? Are you within my network?
Right.
You're just like, I hurt, fix me.
Yeah.
So they get those same things. They forget to, have their housekeepers take the cable box back in time when they're moving.
Yes.
They run into all kinds of, or their income goes up and down.
Mm. Mhm.
If
Mhm.
you were a cleaner last year plus, you
Yeah,
were
it's
not
been
making.
down. Right.
They were not making TV shows for a bit or movies, and there's no
Mhm.
tour.
And no games.
So
Well, they probably still got paid, but
they got paid. The ball players they got paid still.
Mm.
Don't worry about them. Don't lose sleep over.
Right.
But the singers, the dancers, the choreographers, they didn't get paid nothing. So
Mhm.
that hurt them in a bad way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And so you started with helping celebrities because you made a name for yourself. You started helping them with fixing their own credit. And is that what your business still does today? Is help them fix their credit?
Yeah, overwhelmingly.
Okay.
So we get virtually all of our business from a niche group called business managers.
Mm.
And business managers are basically the accountants for the rich and famous. But they do a
Okay.
lot more than just like, pay bills and pay taxes. Like
Mhm.
I've got a million and crazy stories that they tell me. They're like, you know, famous singstress, her grandpa likes to get handed like 10 grand in cash on this corner every week,
Are
every
you s-
Friday,
are you serious?
and we got to find a way to make that work. Or hey, my client needs to get taken to rehab, I'll
Mm.
take them to rehab. Or I've even heard when they're like, my client broke out of rehab and wanted me to take them back to rehab. So I mean, they'll
Fun
pick,
time.
if you buy a house, they're like, this is how much house you can afford.
Mhm.
This is who the mortgage is going to get through. Here's your real estate agent. Here's your insurance agent. Oh, and by the way, your credit needs a little love. We're gonna slide over to Regal. Like those business managers control all of that,
Oh, wow.
and
That's
that's who we
interesting.
get our business from. So overwhelmingly, it's going to be athletes, entertainers,
Mhm.
very well business owners that we're going to get the business for, and that's who we really cater to.
Mhm. So what are the pain points that you found with working with them? Because they all have like similar issues that sort of come up. So what are some of the pain points that you guys have felt like, okay, this is what we really need to do?
So part of it is you got to realize they have huge targets on their back
Mm.
because it's so easy to find information on them. You can go on Wikipedia or something like that. You could find out where they grew up, their birth date, their spouses, their kids.
Mhm.
You could even, in many cases, find the signatures for famous people.
Mm. Oh, wow.
So, oh, here's how to copy their signature. It's written right there. It's all over the web.
Mhm.
So I found that they were targets of identity theft more than anyone else by far.
Really?
Because even high school kids could figure this stuff out. Like,
Mhm.
remember Pop Smoke?
Yeah.
All right, so we were supposed to get him as a client
Mhm.
that week.
Oh, the
The
week he
bill,
passed?
yeah, the week he passed, literally his business manager was like, I'm going over his house this week. We're going to get him enrolled in your credit building service for new emerging artists. It's
Mhm.
like, all right, cool. And then literally what happened is he went to an event.
Mhm.
He he was given, a fancy watch.
Mhm.
He went home, put up a picture on his IG account saying like, look at me in this new
Wow.
Rolly or whatever it was, right?
Mm.
High school kids saw that and they were like, oh, he's got a nice watch. We can go steal it. So they bought one of these reports online that you can get for like $12 from like whitepages.com, or there's over 200 of these companies.
Wow.
And it would literally tell you the layouts of the houses, photos of the
What?
house, out. It'll tell you the addresses of anyone you want to know,
Mhm.
current and former, phone numbers, email addresses. It'll even tell you who their cell phone carrier is, which is
Wow.
how all these celebrities get their Twitter accounts hacked.
Mhm.
They ain't hacking Twitter or Facebook. They're literally just saying, oh, my name is, Jay Z,
Mhm.
and this is my phone number, and I need to port it over to the new iPhone 13,
Oh,
whatever it is. And
wow.
everything on your phone is on that new phone. It's so easy. So anyhow, these kids, what they
Wow.
did,
Mhm.
is they then drove to his house. They waited for him to come home. They barged in, and I mean, they knew where to go because they could see the interior photos beforehand.
Mm.
They got the watch, and then he started to fight back against them, and they
Mm.
shot and killed him.
Oh my god. I didn't even know the details of that story.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, oh yeah, oh
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean, these are high school kids.
Mhm.
Well, imagine what a well-trained cyber criminal can do.
Right. And
So
that's
yeah,
interesting because we've heard a lot of over the years, like, I believe The Rock had a situation, with his house. He had, someone come and break in. Celebrities have their homes broken into all the time, especially with social media. Now, if they're doing posts that are timely and people know exactly where they are. They're like, oh, well, they're not home. So, you know,
Yeah.
I heard also that Dr. Dre, when he was having surgery, when he was getting treated, I think it was for COVID, his house got broken.
He had a brain aneurysm.
Yes, yes. Oh, yes, yes. That's what it was.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the news broke on that, and the thieves were like, oh, we know he's not home.
Exactly.
We're going to go rob him then.
Mm-hmm. Crazy, crazy stuff. So how are you helping to sort of like protect these like vulnerabilities? Because I've had clients that are like have had this issue and that they're like, you know, had things exposed and like I cannot, you know, have this happen again and very concerned about security. So like how are they dealing with these? How are you helping to solve this problem?
Yeah. So what we do is we go to what's called a data broker company.
Okay.
And that's someone who collects all this data on you, down to registered vehicles that you have in your name, any businesses that you own, family and known associates, contact information for them. I mean, it's a ton of data. So what we do is we go and we remove that information and tell them that they have to abide by it. And then we double check to make sure that it's gone. And you simply do that 220 plus times because there's over 200 websites.
Right.
So there's nothing sexy. There's nothing easy about it. You don't just hit a button and then it just disappears. Like you gotta, it's playing whack-a-mole and you gotta beat down 220 and then you gotta make sure it doesn't come back. So it's not for the faint of heart, you know, that want to get into it. And some people will remove themselves from, you know, the largest 5 or so and be happy with that. But it's out there. That info is out there and it will come back.
Right, right. That's interesting. So it doesn't make it difficult for them to then use their credit, because I know, like, you know, when you add these like securities to your credit, like you can't open up accounts, you can't do things like that. Does it make it difficult for them, or is it because they have these managers, it's not an issue, you know?
Oh yeah, because that's a whole separate service. So we had a situation probably like 8-9 years ago where a very famous rapper had his identity compromised down to where they had a copy of his social security card and his driver's license on the web. And these thieves, it's like they weren't looking to monetize it, but they hacked virtually Obama's entire presidential cabinet, from vice down to Secretary of State to the NSA to the head of the FBI. They got the first lady, and then they also went after like a few dozen celebrities, and they just showed all of the data that they could find on them. So you can see Donald Trump's credit report at the time. You could see Hillary Clinton's credit report at the time.
Oh wow.
You know, Kanye, Jay-Z, all these people were included in that, right? So the rapper's business manager reached out to me and said, like, hey, there's all this talk that we don't get what's going on. There's conference calls with the White House, the FBI, heads of legal and security at the credit bureaus. Can you jump on and figure out what we need to do? And I was like, yeah, sure, I got you. So I jumped on and I was like, you know, I've been reading the press, I've been reading the news. I see all these people's information was exposed, but I'm not seeing that the president himself, Barack, I don't see him in any of these things. And they're like, nah, that's because his credit's blocked. And I'm like, oh, well, dude, tell him how this works.
Right.
So I pulled out my notepad and pen and said to each of them, tell me how to set up a block with your company. And that was the beginning of my service, credit block. I'm not very creative when it comes to names, so I just said, I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Now the same thing that Barack got and still gets is what I create for my clients. We do that same process, but it's a 23-step process each time you want to lock and unlock credit. So it ain't easy.
Right.
We've got a whole team of people to do it. So now we can do it in the average is 24 minutes to get it unlocked. But if you want to avoid identity theft, the single best thing that you could do is put a security freeze on your credit report with all 3 bureaus. It is a pain to manage. You can't do it with just one bureau. You got to go to all 3 independently every
Mhm.
time you want to do it. But that is the best way to prevent identity theft, period.
Wow. So I'm just thinking because I've been trying to learn more about this, like this digital world that we're going into. Are you thinking or are you seeing that things might get more? I guess people will be a little bit more exposed as we move to a more digital world, or do you feel like there are things that are there to sort of like help?
Oh yeah, no, there's nothing there to help. I gotta tell you, and it's because of a cost perspective.
Mm,
They were looking at credit card fraud, for example, a few years ago.
hmm.
They figured out that like 0.6% of all transactions are fraudulent.
Oh wow,
That
that's a lot.
that doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot to them.
Hmm.
So what they figured out is if they were to implement the correct, security to prevent theft,
Hmm.
it would cost them far more than it does to just let it roll. And then if they have to pay for credit monitoring due to a breach or something like that, it's cheaper than implementing the right security.
Wow.
So everybody's getting your data, everyone's buying your data. Very few companies have an incentive to really protect it. So that's why you hear about a breach every 15 minutes,
Hmm.
because they know that now you're almost desensitized to it. T-Mobile got hacked. Was there a lot of
Yeah.
people freaking out? Did it make the news? And then not only that, that's like the third time they were hacked.
Yeah, and people were affected. I know people who were significantly affected, so
You got social security numbers and credit card numbers and all that stuff out there. And it's like, look, they just said, hey, we'll pay a fine and we'll pay for credit monitoring, and they kept it moving. Cheaper than implementing security.
so this is credit monitoring for the client, for their customers? They'll pay for that or it's for them?
Yeah, usually in a breach,
Mhm.
a company will say, hey, we'll offer you credit monitoring because they know that like less than 1 in 10 people bother to take them up on it.
Mm. Well, I have
And
T-Mobile, so I'm gonna go ahead and be like, "Yes, thank you, I'll take that."
it's cheap,
Mhm.
but yeah, they pay far less than that than they would to actually secure your data. So trust me, your information is out there. Everybody's information is out there in a breach.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of whether someone is going to pick you
Mm.
to have it happen to that day.
Right, right. Wow. So, I wanted to ask you in terms of like, with the space that you're in, how do you see like what is the mark that you want to make in your field? Is there something that you're like, listen, I want to make sure that this happens because I was here?
Yeah, so I believe in the advancement of women and people of color.
Mm-hmm.
When enter a lot of these rooms, I don't see people that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fighting very hard to make it more commonplace to see people like me,
Mm-hmm.
and then to also help pull up the next generation, because that's what my dad taught me to do. He was in the civil rights generation. They were the first ones to walk into the room
Mm-hmm.
and be black, and that was a big thing. So
Right.
now I'm the second generation, but we're still not seeing people that look like us up above.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I created a networking group for the business management community.
Mm-hmm.
It's overwhelmingly run by old white men. That's who the partner owners are.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk to them about diversity, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're very diverse." But Jose is from Mexico, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's your janitor. That's not diversity. What about
Terrible.
your method, right?" So
Mm-hmm.
to that end, when I created this group, I fought very hard to find as many people of color within all different ranks
Mm-hmm.
within that community, stretching from Los Angeles to London.
Mm-hmm.
I found a great group of people, have assembled them, and now I'm bringing in potential vendors that are diverse as well,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can see, oh, hey, you can build a network of people of color or women that do all types of different law, insurance, real
Mm-hmm.
estate, mortgages, banking. Like you can get all that stuff covered, and you can help us and then help
Right.
pull up people that look like us so that there's more diversity throughout the entire organization from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what I'm pushing for,
Okay.
is to show people an example that I can do this. I'm going to become a fintech company, and there's not many Black people in fintech.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna break through that, and then I'm gonna show other people how to do it, and I'm gonna help transform the business management community so that there's more diversity there too.
I love that. And in terms of legacy, I always like to sort of end on a note with legacy. What sort of legacy do you want to leave? I know that what you said is sort of tied to that, but in terms
Yeah.
of like for your family, how do you want them to experience what you've done in the world?
So I firmly believe and know that our generation is standing on the shoulders of giants.
Mm-hmm.
The civil rights generation was the greatest generation of Americans, period,
Mm-hmm.
especially people of color who said, I'll take a brick to the face, but you're going to let me vote.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's up to us to keep the ball moving forward. And I'm a huge fan of generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Why there's so much inequity today. And I've made it a point that I'm going to be the first generation to really leave significant money to the next generation. I'll leave
Right.
property, I'll leave money. I'm already teaching my kids, they're 6, 10, and 13,
Mm-hmm.
about financial literacy. My 13-year-old can school anybody you know on how the credit system works
That's dope.
and how Wall Street works. And she's like, it's basically legalized gambling. I'm like,
You got it.
yeah, that's it. That's it. Really, yeah, you know.
Right.
So,
It's funny how when you break down these concepts, you know, like when you have to digest them, you're like, this is all it is. It's just like a bunch of fancy words to like confuse, you know, the public. But when you study it, you're just like, okay, it's simple.
no, it is. Like, so I explained to them how
Mm,
in horse racing, for example,
mm,
you know, you're not allowed to drug your horse. You're not allowed to do anything like that. You just got to race them down the track,
mhm,
and the first one wins is that, and you can make bets on that.
mhm.
But the stock market is a lot like that, except you can beat up the horse beforehand, you can drug the horse with anything you want, and
Right,
there's no regulation on that. Like, and
right.
they found all these banks were creating mutual funds that they knew were terrible and were going to go down.
Mhm,
They convinced suckers on the street to invest in it. Then they told their inner circle to bet against it
mhm.
because they knew it was going to fail. And then they profited when it failed.
And nobody did anything about that.
Not illegal. It's not
Yeah.
illegal. Big banks were doing that. So anyhow,
Mhm,
I'm like, you got to be careful and know that you're not the sucker that they're trying to sell that stuff on. You got
mhm.
to educate yourself and look at what's in things, know how the stock market works, be involved in it, because only like 10% of people are.
Mhm.
You got to make your money work for you. So I'm teaching generational wealth to my kids, and I believe that's the legacy of, you know, Generation X, the people of color.
Right.
We have to build that generational wealth. We've been given this opportunity now,
Mhm,
where my grandparents were born into poverty. My parents were born into poverty. They made sure that I wasn't, but
mhm.
now I need to make sure that my kids are, you know, or my grandkids, they're going to be born with money.
Yeah, I love that. Did you did your I think you said your father was in credit before you? Did you say that?
No,
Okay.
my dad worked for the government,
Okay.
and but he's my consigliere now. I
Okay.
talk to him every day
Okay,
uh,
awesome.
about what's going on and how to help. But no, he used to run the Hale House, which was a nonprofit up in Harlem.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
So you got all that rich knowledge and business acumen was passed down to you. So now you're adding on to that and demystifying the financial literacy for your family.
and you know what's funny is growing up,
Hmm.
he told me, you know, as a black man, you're going to have to work twice as hard as the
Hmm.
white man. The same thing.
Mm.
And a lot of people of color I know were told the same thing by their parents.
Hmm.
But I realized it was a complete lie.
Mm.
You got to work 3 times as hard.
I was gonna say, do tell.
Exactly. You know,
You're so
especially
right.
Black women, like y'all gotta you gotta work three and a half times as hard.
Definitely. Tell me about it. It was very much shocking to me when I became an attorney, how like devalued and unseen, I was even as an attorney. And I think coming into the field or pursuing law was partly, and I never really even said this before, but was partly to be seen. Like I felt in like and I worked in the corporate world. I worked in mortgage companies and finance. And I thought that, maybe if I have higher accolades, people will see me. Right. And then becoming an attorney, I'm like, yeah, nope, still don't see me. And so it was a, pretty much a wake up call and a shock to really like experience that. But like you said, you just, you do what you got to do, you make your own way, and then you show them.
And you pull up the next one.
And you pull up the next one. Absolutely. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. This was a great conversation. So if anyone wants to connect with you, with your businesses, with your groups, where can they find you?
Hit us up over email is best. info@regalcredit.com.
Okay. Awesome. So
Yeah.
anything else? You're also an author though.
Yeah, there's that. So I sold a few books.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a book on credit called Your Score.
Mm-hmm.
And a very fun fact: if you Google Anthony Davenport and Oprah, it will show you that she included an excerpt of my book on how I do this identity theft service that I learned from learning how they manage President Obama's credit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you sell like 25,000 books on credit. You just tap Oprah on the shoulder and say, hey girl.
Yeah, tweet about my book, Oprah, please.
You take a look at this, and so she dug it. So yeah, it made the Amazon top 100 bestseller list in 2018, and
Awesome.
I'm working on it now.
Awesome. That's definitely good information. So where can they get that book? Did you say Amazon?
You can get it on Amazon. Is the cheapest place, honestly.
Okay.
Amazon is gangster. They always. What's funny is I buy it on Amazon and it's cheaper than if I buy it directly through my own publisher.
That is hilarious. Yeah.
I gotta buy my own book. They gave me like $30 for free, and then they were like, "Nah, brother, you got to pay for all the rest of them."
Wow, that is so funny. Well, thank you so much, Anthony. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Looking forward to more conversations. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a lot of fun, and you take care.
Sure, you too.